Hello and welcome to another episode of the Fiduciary Podcast, brought to you by the Institute for the Fiduciary Standard. I'm Kaleb Paddock.
And I'm Anne Marie Ashworth.
And Anne Marie, what is our topic today?
Kaleb, our topic today is conflicts. We're going to be talking about two main topics as it comes to being a fiduciary with conflicts of interest. We're going to talk about one, how a fiduciary avoids conflicts of interest, and then two, it's natural for every business to have some sort of conflict of interest, and it varies business to business. But we're going to talk about how a fiduciary mitigates conflicts of interest. So Kaleb, do you want to jump in and give a little overview and thoughts on how a fiduciary avoids conflicts of interest?
Absolutely. So we want to make sure we're very clear from the start. There is no model that is conflict free. There will always be conflicts, but I think what we're talking about today is exactly what you said, Anne Marie. How do fiduciaries seek to mitigate or avoid completely very obvious conflicts of interest? So the main conflict in this profession is compensation. And so I think with a fiduciary, the attitude and the spirit of a fiduciary is to really proactively educate their clients on how the client is paying for their services. So I think a common model here, Anne Marie, is assets under management. So charging like 1% of assets under management, that would be a conflict in the sense that if the assets go down, the advisor makes less money. So there could be recommendations the advisor might want to avoid so that they don't see their assets under management drop. But Anne Marie, what would be maybe an example or a way a fiduciary could communicate that or mitigate that if their compensation is tied to assets under management? Are there any, maybe just a simple way to try to avoid that or minimize that in communicating to the client?
I think that's a great point and question, Kaleb. You know, the first thing that comes to mind is whenever I think about adding or subtracting dollars to an account or an account itself, the trigger goes off in my fiduciary brain that says, I need to alert the client. So whether it's a client saying, you know, this is a held away asset that exists, but you don't have it under management, they say they want to roll it over, I always say, okay, well, this is how it's going to affect you. Maybe it's a small enough amount that it doesn't affect their day-to-day or annual fees, but at the same point, they need to know it's going to be charged under our assets under management. Another great way is cash. When you think about cash, if a client says, hey, I want to hold on to a certain amount, we're going to buy a house in 6 months. To me as a fiduciary, if you know that they have a short-term need for cash, it doesn't feel right to be charging on it. So I know, for instance, our company, if we have a client that has cash and they just want someone to be purchasing bonds or something very minimal, we'll create another account and not charge on that account simply to keep the cash separate to avoid that conflict of interest, because it doesn't make sense and it's not in the client's best interest to be paying us a fee when it's just cash that can be sitting in a checking account.
I think that's tremendous, and I think it shows how as a fiduciary, we're not just disclosing the conflict, but taking action to actually open that account and say, listen, you know, we as a fiduciary would feel that this is in your best interest to just have this cash set aside. You know, something else I've seen advisory firms do is some advisory firms just say enough is enough on the compensation in terms of assets growing over time. And I've seen some firms cap their fees. And I think this is another way, it's not for every firm, but there are many firms that just say at a certain level, they kind of determine what that is for the profitability of their business. But I remember an advisor years ago before I got into this business, and I was in a meeting where he capped his fees in front of the 3 business owners. He was a 401k advisor. And these 3 business owners looked at him and they said, we've never had a service provider in 35 years of business host a meeting where the main agenda topic was capping the fees at a certain level. And so the amount, I think, is irrelevant. What did he, I think people watching might want to know, what did he cap them at? Did he cap them at 10,000, 30,000, 50,000? But that's irrelevant. What the point is the spirit. And the spirit of fiduciary is to take a hard look at that. And some firms will cap their fees and just say, this is more than enough compensation for our relationship. We will proactively just put a cap on those fees. And again, not every firm will do that, but it's an example of how to minimize or to mitigate and avoid that conflict. So if the client wants to bring over more money, or they see their balances grow over time, whether it's through the cash or capping the fees, you've got this proactive desire to communicate, that conflict and to either minimize or avoid completely.
Yeah.
So is there anything?
Proactiveness. You hit it. You hit the nail, the hammer on the nail when you said, it turns into proactiveness, transparency,
Yes.
and all of that stems from avoiding of the conflict. And then if you can't avoid it, how are you going to mitigate it? And then it's like a never-ending circle of communication, transparency.
Yes.
As you said, yes, exactly.
Because, and we'll wrap up on this, but I think it's important to realize some clients with that asset management model, like let's say 1% of asset management, unlimited, no cap, there are clients that really like the mentality of you do better, I do better. That kind of, we can kind of get our gym clothes out and sing a little song about you do better, we do better. But some clients like that. They kind of like, if there's a recession, your compensation as an advisory firm gets brutally cut, down, and we like that you're in this with us together. Other clients will just say, how much do we have to pay you before it becomes just a really large number? So I think by communicating this to the clients and seeking to minimize those conflicts, you give the opportunity for the client to share. And some clients will say, that's okay. If we're paying more over time on that model, that's okay, because that means we're doing well, you're doing well. So I think it's the communication of that, because some clients will not mind that the fees rise, over time, because they like kind of that relationship of you do better, we do better type of mentality. But I think it goes back to that communication, right? Seeking to communicate, hey, that we're going to get paid more, just like you mentioned that you think about that, Anne Marie, as you're going about your day and your work week. You're aware of it, you're communicating it, and then the clients can communicate back. So anyways, great topic, conflicts of interest. Thank you for watching the Fiduciary podcast today. It's brought to you by the Institute for the Fiduciary Standard, and I'm Kaleb Paddock.
And I'm Anne Marie Ashworth, and thanks again for watching. Bye for now.